Welcome. I'm the Frail Blaze. Today's story. I work as a lawyer. My latest client is an immortal with their soul on the line. Now, I work in a relatively small town, pretty far from any major city, so I'm not taking on any newsworthy cases. And my clients aren't usually offering me the big bucks for my services. So you can imagine my surprise when yesterday morning a client walked in carrying two heavy-looking sacks, sat down in front of me, and opened one of the sacks to reveal money. A lot of money. Even more surprising was the fact that the client was a young girl who couldn't have been any more than 17 years old. Now you can understand why I was already a bit more than skeptical. Then she told me she was an immortal, and that she needed my help in changing that. No sooner than I had awkwardly laughed, she interrupted me in a way that made my jaw drop. I was Tommy O'Malley, Mr. O'Malley to you. Back then, I taught you mathematics for a few years in the early 1980s. I was a bit confused now. I did have a Mr. O'Malley teaching me back then when I was a teenager. I remember him mostly for being strict and for being excessively mean. I noticed that the teenage girl had the same blonde hair and green eyes that he had had. Perhaps they were relatives and this was just some sort of prank. That would have been a bit strange, though, considering that I heard about Mr. O'Malley's death a little under a month ago. I was trying to rationalize this in my head, but her next statement blindsided me. Near the end of the school year, your first year of school, I kept you behind and yelled at you, saying that you wouldn't be half the lawyer that your father was if you kept skipping classes and failing tests. Then you started to cry. Yeah. I suppose Mr. O'Malley was a mean old man, but I can't see him telling that charming tale to his granddaughter so that she could play a prank on me, not least a month after he was dead. Now, I wasn't really convinced that old Mr. O'Malley had reincarnated as this teenage girl, but I definitely wanted to know what the hell was going on. Okay, let's say you're immortal. Why are we here? I was given this curse in the summer of 1641. I was only in my 20s, perhaps my early 30s, yet I had fallen ill. I was coughing up blood for over a week, and I knew that I hadn't long left. One night, I sat down by a river, feeling sorry for myself. Now, this teenager just told me a story that she'd been around since the 17th century, but something about the sincerity and regret in the way she spoke had drawn me in. I've never been one to deny the existence of the supernatural, but I was still wary, so I let her continue. I was lamenting that I had done nothing in my life yet, and yet it was being cut short before my hair had gone gray. I had no wife, no children, and I was far from wealthy. Then I spotted him, across the river, a man wearing rags, humming a tune until he looked upon me. The young girl's tone of voice was one of anger, of hate, but her eyes looked fearful. He asked me what had me in such a foul mood on such a fine night. I grumbled that it was very apparent that I was dying, and that's when he grinned, a terrible, wretched smile. He stepped across the river, and the water froze under his feet. A cold chill went up my spine. He offered you immortality? I asked, in response to her silence. I asked him what the cost was, to which he told me that I would find out should I accept his offer. And What was the cost? I found myself whispering. After I shook his hand and we walked into a forest, I expected for my sickness to go away, but I began coughing up even more blood until I died. Then, a little under 3 days later, I awoke, feeling healthier than I had felt in weeks. I got out of bed, walked to a river flowing past outside, and found that the reflection that I saw was not my own. Whose was it? I inquired. Mary, a girl I had shared a brief romance with when I was younger, but she was married off and moved to another part of the country with a richer man. My consciousness had replaced hers, and I had to resume her life. It was a miracle that I wasn't thrown into a sanatorium by her husband for acting strangely, but he wasn't very attentive, let alone present most of the time. Well, that's lucky for you, I think, I said. And then I died for a second time, a decade later, from pneumonia. And I awoke in the body of or I should say Mary's, son. Then 40 years later, I died for a third time, waking up in his, or my, son's body. 20 years later, it was the body of his, or my, best friend. I was reincarnated as the people I cared most about. Whatever I made a deal with had played a cruel trick on me. This brand of immortality is worse than death. Got more than you bargained for there, I rambled, still trying to figure out if I believed her or not. On the one hand, the whole idea was crazy. On the other hand, I felt somehow convinced. Plus, a huge sack of money didn't hurt. So why'd you come to me? And why is it worth that big stash of cash? I asked. Last, I was Tommy O'Malley. I'd been Tommy O'Malley since he was a toddler. I got a good teaching job, but stupidly, I had a kid. I abandoned him before he turned 5. I foolishly hoped that I could save him from the consequences of my wish. So I became a recluse, only showing up for work. Were you being a mean old fella in case you wound up attached to any of us? I laughed, but stopped after the young girl glared at me, and I swear it was the same glare Mr. O'Malley would give us when we talked in class. She continued. But then, in 2008, my son came to see me, and I don't know how he didn't hate me, but he said he wanted his kids to meet their grandpa. I should have turned him down, but I'd gotten lonely, and little Kelly melted my heart. I realized where this was going, and sat silently, let him continue. 3 weeks ago, Tommy O'Malley, that is to say, me, died in his sleep, and I woke up as Kelly at around 2 in the morning. I ran to the edge of the town crying, and then I saw him again, the man who granted my wish. I began swearing like a sailor at him, and then he spoke. Immortality, not all you imagined it? That's all right. Meet me 1 month from now at the river we first met. I can take back your wish, but it'll cost you. Kelly stared at the floor and said, I can't let him have my soul, but my immortality needs to end. Otherwise I might end up reincarnating as one of Tommy's grandchildren, or my siblings, anyone who I care for. I understood, oddly. I had to raise my own daughter all by myself. I wouldn't be able to stand the thought of her soul being kicked out of her body. Still, Kelly was asking a lot of me. I responded, You think that my time in law school will help you cut a better deal with a demon? I'm a little out of my depth in that regard. She opened the second sack to reveal books, scrolls, some printed documents, and sharply said, "These are some recorded instances of a guy who sounds like my curse giver. Learn what you can, and remember, I'm paying you a pretty big portion of the money I earned as Tommy. Meet me tomorrow night." With that, she left, carrying the money bag. I'm in my 50s now. I shouldn't be buying this whatsoever, but somehow I was convinced. Whether it be the apparent sincerity of Kelly, or Mr. O'Malley, or whoever, or the big pile of money, I quickly turned my attention to the documents she had. Let me tell you, these seemed more like fairy tales and urban legends, but I couldn't stop reading. All the tales originate from the same region and involved our boy taking advantage of those who are on the verge of death. It always takes the form of a man with long black hair, wearing rags, glassy eyes, and an unnerving grin. Seriously, there were some really creepy old man drawings of him included. Before I knew it, it was dark outside. I read the last document containing the coordinates, as well as a note saying to be there tomorrow at midnight. I tried to sleep, but I kept seeing that old-timey drawing of a blind young man with a sinister smile. The day went quickly, and soon I left for the destination. I was starting to believe this more and more. The pay was also more than I was used to. When I arrived, I found Kelly with the bag of money. "Did you figure anything out?" she whispered. "I have a hunch that the people whose bodies you hijacked, it has their souls now." Tears began falling from Kelly's eyes, but they suddenly widened. I heard a humming from across the river, and it sent shivers down my spine. A man in rags, with long hair, began crossing the river. "Did you find another way?" Kelly frantically asked me. "I'm sorry, but for the sake of your family, I think you'll have to let it take your soul." "There's another way. I'm so sorry," she sobbed. Then the blind man put its hand on her shoulder. I watched in horror as the life left her body immediately. Yet she had a smile on her face as she began to turn to dust and blow away in the wind. Shame. A soul that's been around for a few hundred years would have satisfied me greatly. But I'm nothing if not patient. And I suppose you're an investment. How's it feel to be immortal, pal? No, 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 oh no, no, no. No, no, no. No, I stuttered as I ran back to my car, hearing the young blind man chuckling at me even as I got far away. That was last night. I have been coughing up blood all day while staring at photographs of my daughter, fearing for her soul. Well, quite the tale. I've heard of other stories where immortality is not all it's chalked up to be, but this has quite the twist on it that I'd not heard before. Let me know what you thought of this tale in the comments beneath. And I do hope that you'll join me in the future for more Frail Blaze tales.